Welcome to day 20 of the BeReel365 series. Today's question is, what is your favorite place in the world? To be honest with you, I have not been that many places. I just have not traveled that much. I have only been up and down the East Coast, and not everywhere up and down the East Coast, only a few places. And I've been overseas once to two different countries. So I have lived several places. So I was born in Danville. I grew up in Farmville, Virginia. I moved to Lynchburg. I moved to Myrtle Beach for 6 years, off and on. I lived in Richmond. I've lived in Richmond for a long, long time. I currently live in Christiansburg. And then I've traveled to uh, Baltimore and Philadelphia. I love Philadelphia. Absolutely love Philadelphia. Really, really, really want to move there one day. And I've been in New York City one time. New York, let me tell you about my experience. This is a complete side note. Let me tell you about my experience, first time ever experience of New York. So I went up there for Thanksgiving, and I think it was my daughter's mom's family lives in New Jersey, like an hour from New York City, and uh, and so we went up there for Thanksgiving, and Black Friday we enter into New York City. We get off of the subway, and we make our way up to Times Square. And my very first experience of New York City is at 5 p.m. on Black Friday in the middle of Times Square. It was culture overload, but I loved it. I loved every second. I had to stand there for like 15 minutes because there was so much going on. If you've ever been in New York City, and you can imagine on top of that, 5 p.m. on Black Friday, absolute just insanity and just visual overload in front of you and around you. So I literally had to stand there for like 10 minutes just to take it all in before I even took another step, which was kind of hard because there's thousands and thousands of people, and they're trying to push you over and get around you, and they're screaming at you and all sorts of stuff. It's amazing. So New York City is one of my favorite places. I've only been there one time, but I absolutely love it. I'm just a city guy. I love the vibe and the energy of a big city. Richmond's not that big of a city, obviously nowhere near New York City, but it's just I don't know which bridge it is, but there's a bridge where you can come into Richmond. You're curving around the bridge, and you have the skyline there of of all the buildings that are in front of you. And at nighttime, I love coming in on that bridge. It's so gorgeous, and you just immediately feel the vibe and the energy that is Richmond, Virginia. I just love that. Very side note. I'll also say that there is a place in Myrtle Beach. If you go past North Myrtle Beach into Cherry Grove, at the very end of the beach in Cherry Grove is a place called the Point. It literally is where the beach ends. And when they have the beach, they have the intercoastal waterway that comes in and meets the ocean. So the beach ends right there, and about 120 yards across from the point is an island that's there. It is about 3 football fields of just wide open beach area right there at the point, and it is absolutely gorgeous. The sun actually rises over top of the island that's directly across from the point. And when I was living in Myrtle Beach, probably 2 or 3 times a week, I would go to the point early in the morning and just sit there and watch the sun come up because it was so incredibly beautiful and relaxing. So that's one of my favorite places on earth. Also, I told you I went overseas. I visited Paris and London on a trip when I was in high school. Absolutely hated Paris, believe it or not. It was extremely dirty. I'm sure it was just the parts that we saw. Did not like it. I also was deathly ill from something I ate while I was there, and so that probably didn't do me so well while I was there. And I also got hit by a car while walking on the street while I was in Paris. Not very hard, but it did knock me over. So Paris experience, not a good experience. London, on the other hand, absolutely loved London. I actually loved it so much that when I was Gosh, it's been 12. When I was early 20s, I actually made plans to move to London. I had a job lined up, I had a place lined up, and right when I got all of it together and literally was within months of moving there, I found out that I was going to have a daughter. So I, of course, did not move to London and I stayed here. Super happy about how that turned out. Uh, Yet still, I love London so much, I was actually going to move there. Beyond that, I haven't visited really any other places. I've been out to San Francisco once. That was kind of cool. It was obviously pretty out there, but super dense area for where everything is. But, and this might surprise you, my favorite place on earth to be is actually by myself within my own mind. Now, that might sound crazy, and maybe it is, but it's the truth. Many of you may not know that I actually grew up an only child, and I also didn't have very many friends when I was growing up. I was always an outcast at school. I never played really any sports. I played baseball for a little bit, but I was terrible at it. I played basketball for a little bit, also terrible at it. I will not get into those two stories. If you see me one on one, I'll tell you a funny story about when I played basketball for the very last time during high school. But because I didn't have very many friends, I spent a lot of time by myself. So I was very much into reading comic books when I was younger, which led me into drawing and listening to music. And I was very much into back then they had these architecture magazines that had the blueprints for all the houses in them. So I would draw blueprints. I know, very nerdy, right? But I got used to spending time within my own mind, which I think has been beneficial for me ever since then. I am a very cerebral person. I think about things constantly in my own head. I think it is part of what drives me to be such a creative person. I don't think it is by happenstance or circumstance that I ended up doing what I'm doing now, making videos and speaking and doing magic and all of that. I think that is very much on purpose, based on the experiences that I've had since I was younger. I love being in my mind. I love thinking about things. I can never get enough information. If you know anything about me personally, you know that when I want to learn about something, I dive headfirst into it and I dive really, really deep into it. At one time, to give you an example, I was very much interested in deja vu. And I literally, no joke, literally spent 6 months every day for hours a day researching deja vu. And I read every day still now. Some days I miss, let's be honest. Some days I miss, but for the most part, I read at least a few pages of a book every single day. I think a lot of people are not comfortable being by themselves. And so it's important to be self-aware of who you are and what you want out of your own life. What also is very much important for this particular question today is whatever place it is for you, try to get to that place as often as possible. Because I'm almost for certain, if you're anything like me, that being in your favorite place on earth brings you peace and relaxation and happiness. And that is something that we should try to cultivate for ourselves as much as possible.